Judge Logan?
I'm here again.
Great. Judge Alexander?
Here.
Stancil Ford?
Here.
Great. Judge Brody Kane?
Here.
And Michael Wright?
Here.
All right, great. Looks like we have quorum. I imagine Starnes will join us later on in the meeting. So, but we have enough folks here to go ahead and conduct business. So we'll move on. The notice of meeting then, notice of November 1, 2019 meeting of the Private Probation Service Council was posted to the Private Probation Service Council website on October 14th, 2019. And Mr. Ford, if you could put it back on mute then. It looks like we're getting a little bit of static there. Thank you, sir. All right, so we've got the notice of meeting. We've done our roll call. We'll have to, since we're doing a teleconference, we'll need to read the statement of necessity into the record and then vote on that. And members, you could keep in mind that anytime we do a teleconference, we have to do a roll call vote. So any actionable item that we vote on, we'll have to go down the roll and get the vote of each member to memorialize that forward. The statement of necessity is as follows. According to TCA 844-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, the governing body must file such determination of necessity, including the recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Judge Starnes?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're doing fine, sir. You're right on time. We're reading the statement of necessity as we speak. All right, so I'll follow up there. With the Office of Secretary of State no later than 2 working days after the meeting. Furthermore, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at the meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. This is the regular scheduled meeting for the Private Probation Service Council, and the purpose of today's meeting with some of the members attending by teleconference is to discuss the agenda as noticed on the website earlier. If we could have a motion to accept that statement of necessity, we'll get our staff attorney to file that with the Secretary of State's office here within the next couple days. Do we have such a motion?
Judge Logan.
All right. Judge Logan, then, was that a motion that I heard?
Yes.
All right. And do we have a second? Was that a second from Ms. Alexander or Judge Alexander? Thank you, Judge. So we have a second from Judge Alexander. For roll call vote, Judge Logan?
Aye.
Judge Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Ford? Mr. Ford?
Ah.
Great. Judge Kane?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
And Judge Starnes?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That's passed in. We'll get that filed forthwith. All right, moving on. The agenda. I trust everyone had an opportunity to look at all the items in the agenda as well. Is there any edits or recommendations as to the meeting or to the agenda that or changes that you would like to recommend? Okay. I'll take the silence then as an indicator that the agenda is fine as it is. Of course, we have new business, so if something comes to mind, we can always introduce that there. So with the agenda that we have in place, do we have a motion to accept the agenda as written?
Judge Kane makes motion.
All right. Judge Kane, was that a motion?
Yes.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second. Stancil Forward.
Thank you, sir. We got a second from Mr. Ford. For roll call vote, Judge Logan?
Aye.
Judge Alexander?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Judge Kane?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
And Judge Starnes?
Aye.
All right, thank you, members. The agenda's passed. We'll move on to the May minutes then. Of course, it's been quite a ways since our last meeting, but I trust it is as you recall. And of course, the video is also available as well. Do you have any comments, edits, questions in regards to the minutes?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. We'll entertain a motion to accept the May minutes. Then, do we have such a motion?
Judge Kane so moved.
All right, Judge Kane, we have a motion to accept the May minutes. Do we have a second?
Second. Judge Logan.
I think with that second, was that Judge Starnes or Logan?
I'll make
Okay, great. We have a motion to accept that by Judge Kane, and then we have a second by Starnes, Judge Starnes. For roll call vote, Judge Logan,
Aye.
Judge Alexander,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Judge Kane,
Aye.
Mr. Wright,
Aye.
Judge Starnes.
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, to the director's report then. We got a little bit to cover with the budget. And before I begin, I was remiss not to introduce our new member, Mr. Wright. He comes to us from private probation. So we're looking forward to his contribution, especially as we get to the part as it pertains to qualifying and continuing education when we have that discussion. He's very experienced, comes to us by nomination as well. So I look forward to his contribution. Do you have any comments or anything you'd like to say to the board or the members?
I'd just like to thank you for welcoming me on board and look forward to hopefully making some meaningful contributions to the council. So,
All right, thank you, sir. And Mr. Ford, if we're getting a little bit more feedback still from your from phone as well. If you could put that back on mute, thank you. Thank you, sir. All right, thank you, Mr. Wright. It was a pleasure meeting you this morning as well. We've already dug in a little bit with the orientation, but I imagine if you or any other member has any questions, then just ask that, and we'll of course provide whatever assistance we can. All right, so to the budget. I may spend just a little bit extra time here for the sake of our new member, and of course, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those as well. The first page we're looking at is the total reserves from year to year. You'll look at the total expenditures in that middle section, and then you have additional expenditures. The total expenditures there are Edison line items. Those are basically our accounting system where our accounts payable, payouts for whatever billing that would come in. That's itemized in our formal system. It's called Edison. We also do our travel there. Many of you members are somewhat familiar with that. But that's where we do most of our accounting. So those line items there are basically accounts for which we make those payouts. Now, if you go below that, there's line items that don't necessarily show up in a pre-populated line item, but still would fall underneath the program share of various cost backs. Some of those cost backs, if you're looking at, let's look at administrative cost backs in particular. A lot of the programs will share some of the same expenses, and so we try to apportion or prorate those expenses according to each program. For example, we all share the same building, we share the same staff, and we share the same administrative supplies, things of that nature. Or when we were going through the move, we're all hiring vendors to facilitate that move, such as movers or consultants or whatever the like for that sort of support. Well, the administrative cost backs is a portion is allocated based on number of licensees, the budget plan for each board or program, and also number of complaints. So a good example is we are just a fraction of a percent of that administrative cost backs total program, whereas Cosmo and Barber usually they ride about 16-17%, almost 1/5 of all of regulatory boards administrative cost backs is Cosmo and Barber. But they also have 60,000 licensees, have quite a few more administrative complaints. And for example, we don't have a legal report today, but whereas their legal report would be pretty lengthy. So as a result, they're going to pick up more of the lion's share of the administrative cost backs, or we're only going to pick up a fraction of a percent there. So it's just a place for that accounting, investigation, legal as well. So you have total cost backs with total expenditures there, and then of course licensing revenue. That's what we take in with our quarterly provider fee and the like, and just licensing revenue. Case and complaint revenue, that's when we assess on a consent order, if there's a penalty assessed, whatever comes in there would be the case and complaint revenue. State regulatory fee basically is a reduction of revenue. It's basically an accounting term from what I understand. I'm not an accountant, but typically that we would call that an expense. but apparently anytime there's a workaround, basically we pay about $5 to print out licenses. We do that through finance and administration. They do that for us, but since it's an internal department, it's not a true expense, so it's just a reduction in revenue. That's how they itemize that there. If you look at the very bottom of our reserves, we're adding a little bit to the reserves, not a ton. So we're actually tracking pretty good when it comes to operating budget. Where it's those, so it's pretty narrow margins there. But we started with about 654,000, and you can see that we added 30,000 roughly then, and then 10 to 11,000 each year, getting us to about 700, a little over 700,000. So we're in pretty good stead there. If you look at the second page, you're getting basically a drill down, a trend for this fiscal year, and apparently this fiscal year just closed. As we'll have some in our meeting in February, you'll get the new numbers for the next fiscal year. But this gives you an idea what that looks like. As you'll see, every quarter you have the quarterly provider fee, so we're in surplus. If you go all the way down to the bottom, it runs red for a while, but then you'll have that green, that big number there. That's your quarterly provider fees coming in to offset those expenses. Nothing outside the ordinary there. June 19th, technology, there's a couple items that I'd like to highlight. There's only two things that really jumped out at me, and those have since been addressed. The June 19th technology fee, it was $2,500. That was due to core enhancements, which were made due to the recent law changes. As everyone knows, we went through some law changes, so we had to put in a lot of tickets to get our online system current and to be able to receive and to administer those changes and implement those changes according to the direction of the board. Well, those are tickets put in with our IT department, and then as a result, afforded back to the program. So that's what you're seeing there. August 19th investigations. You'll see a pretty good number there as well. August 19th, or excuse me, yeah. Looks like the third page where we're getting into the next year. August 19th, there's a pretty good little number there in investigations that you don't see anywhere else. So upon investigating that, it was determined that was not to be charged to private protective services, or excuse me, private probation services, but was supposed to be charged to private protective services. So it just made it to the wrong line item, but that's going to be reallocated accordingly. So that's on our radar. That'll be removed from the budget. So and returned back to the program. Other than that, everything else looks like it's tracking as it should be. Are there any questions in regards to the budget? Okay. Looks like we're in good fiscal health, and we'll continue to track those. And if we see any, I think anything outside the ordinary or any irregular sort of charges, we'll of course address those as they appear, much like we did with the investigations on August 19th there. Okay. I think we're ready for the 2020 meeting dates. Let's take a look at those. We always try to put at least 4 on the schedule. We don't have to come to each of those. I think the statute states that we meet as necessary, as the board determines necessary. We canceled last meeting, and of course we teleconference today. So there's freedom there, but these rooms can be somewhat at a premium. So we want to make sure we can get in and have something on the schedule if we need it. If you can, I'll just read those dates, and if you could let me know if they comport with your calendar. But they're basically modeled after the same pattern that we have now. It'll be a Friday. I believe it's the first Friday of each of those months quarterly. So February 7th, May 1st, August 7th, and November 6th. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Okay.
These meetings have to be on Friday, I guess?
That's been they don't have to, but that's been the pattern thus far.
All right, that's the worst day for me, but I'll make it work.
And of course, there's always the freedom where the schedule would not allow to call in if it's necessary.
I don't want to rock the boat. No, that's fine.
Okay. We have a motion then to accept the meeting dates as currently written.
Second. It's Judge Logan.
All right. Thank you, Judge Logan. We have a motion to accept that. Then do we have a second?
Second, Stansel Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. We have a second by Mr. Ford then. Roll call vote, Judge Logan,
Aye.
Judge Alexander,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Judge Kane,
Aye.
Mr. Wright, Judge Starnes.
Aye.
All right, thank you so much. It looks like those are all our actionable items thus far, unless we, of course, once we get into the education, something could develop. But right now, on the agenda, those are the only actionable items. Right now, we have the company audit update, and I'd like to pivot to Director Roxana Gamusio, and she'll provide that.
Thank you, and I want to thank you all for participating. First of all, I know how important your time is, and we really appreciate it. I also want to take a minute to welcome our newest member, Mr. Wright. Thank you for being with us. Again, I'm Roxana Gamusio. I'm Executive Director with this program, and I do want to give you all just a quick update on the regulatory boards and some of our changes. As you know, Glenn and I have actually shared 15 programs under us, so we're very excited now to be down to 9 programs. And of course, private probation staying with us, it means we're going to have more time to do some of the very needed things. So we are very excited and always available to you. So I will summarize what we've been doing regarding the law changes and what we've been able to provide for the companies as well as the officers if they had any questions. We started with what's called Get Notified. That is an email system that we have for all of our programs. If for some reason you're not signed up to get these emails, it's on our website through the Private Probation Services Council. On the far right under Contact button, you will see a Get Notified. And of course, you can sign up for this program and any others you're interested in. So we always encourage our companies, anyone that's licensed with us, but even the consumers, to make sure to sign up. So we did a Get Notified email on June 27th to anyone signed up with this program. And that email informed everyone of the 2 public chapters that passed. So that was our first method of communication. We then, on August 6th, emailed all of our licensed companies, letting them know of the public chapters that were added, the impact of the laws. We summarized, obviously with legal's approval, everything that was taking place and changing. And that email was sent to all of the companies directly. Then we did a follow-up on September the 19th. The purpose of that follow-up and the language was a little bit different. We informed all the companies that we would be doing a telephone audit, that we would reach out to make sure that they were aware of the changes. The 3 big points on one of the public chapters was, of course, the fingerprinting through the FBI, the reduction in the continuing education hours, as well as the penalty fee going down. So really, one of those 3 items was big, and we wanted to make sure to be available to answer questions. So that started on the 19th of September. At that point, we had 31 licensed companies with us, and we started the phone call. So it was a divide and conquer, and I am happy to let you know that we've actually spoken to all of the companies, with the exception of 2 that were playing phone tag. But a good number, 11 of them, have completed their audit. That means during those conversations, we answered any questions they had about the sunset, about our audit with the program, documentations in the officers' files, what we like to see about the training schedules. Just made ourselves available to answer everything. The fingerprinting was, of course, the big piece. We do not currently have an OIR number with the FBI. So what we have done for the companies is provided step-by-step instructions on how to log into Identigo, create a account, obtain your background check, and currently those are the reports that we're using. So to not be in non-compliance and put this off longer, we've rolled that out to the company so they can start getting the fingerprints back. And our goal is to have all the companies with all the officers that they have in our system, proof of background. If we have any issue with anyone, obviously address it, and we have not. anyone that's coming on board as a new officer, we're requiring that immediately as well. So it has gone pretty well. Due to that audit, we've also gone through the list of officers that each company has, and that probably had never been done before. So it was a good time to review the names of the officers. As you all know, our officers don't pay for their registration or their license. It's connected to the company they work with. So we took advantage of these calls to be able to check on all the officers we have in the database, and we had 68 additional officers go inactive. In other words, that were connected to these companies but no longer working there. We've added 11 officers on a couple of cases. The companies weren't aware that the officers needed to be registered this way, and so we took care of that. We show 3 companies in the near future between now and the end of December that will be closing. And Judge Alexander, one is in your area. They're just restructuring. Some of their clients are going to the jurisdictions within the municipality. So we will be down to 28 companies by year end. And that just may be a trend or just a coincidence. But as we've had conversations, they've looked at their situations as well. And so I think it's going well. Our goal again was just to be in compliance as quickly as possible. And I welcome any questions that you have regarding what we've done, what else you'd like to see us done. Again, Glenn and I are available to you always if you hear things or want us to do anything differently.
Roxanne, this is Judge Alexander.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned emails that were going out. Should they have come to us, or do we need to go on there and register?
So the emails that went out are to those individuals registered. And yes, I would encourage you to register. If you log into the website, and on the far right under Contact Us, you will see it says Get Notified. By all means, pick any of the programs. It's all of our programs under Commerce and Insurance. And the emails are only about important things, such as this, laws and rule changes. And Judge Alexander, when you log in, you'll actually be able to click on the word Private Probation Services Council, and there you'll see all the historical emails that ever went out. For example, as of January 1st of this year, all of regulatory boards enacted a low income waiver. That means that first license for individuals coming on board could be waived if they qualify for federal programs such as Medicaid or food stamps. So that's been a wonderful thing for many of our programs. We've given away. Yeah, we've.
Okay, I'm on there now.
Wonderful.
And I'm ready. Yeah, it's very easy. You just go to Contact Us and sign up for notifications, put your name, and then I'm marking private probation.
Perfect. Thank you, Judge. I think, like I say whenever I do outreaches, it isn't going to be junk mail. It's going to be, heaven forbid you have a fee increase or decrease, but anything that really impacts you. It's a way for us to communicate with those that are interested in hearing from us. So we started there, but then my follow-up emails were directly to the companies. We just found that we really needed to make sure they heard about the changes. We also wanted them to know about the public chapter that added the audit piece that the comptroller's office could impose, so that if they are called upon and their records are going to be audited, they weren't surprised. So we made sure to make these calls about education as well. If there are no questions, as always, please reach Glenn or myself. We are happy to make ourselves available. Our goal is to have really good records within all of these files. We can't go back to the original records that, due to the flood, we lost on some of the companies, but moving forward, we've got almost everything online. Our companies are going to be able to do their initial officers online as well, and that should be live within a month. So, we're trying to encourage our companies to use the system more, and hopefully soon even their quarterly provider fees will be able to come in that way. So, anything you think we can help with, we are definitely open to ideas. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, and as always, your conversation with us continues, so you can always reach out to us by email if you think of something, and then Roxanne and I or any member of our staff will, of course, move appropriately and address all of those as they come in. So, all right, we can move on then to the legal section of our agenda. We don't have our legal report today. I put down legislative updates, but really, in essence, it's there's no new laws or chapters to address. This will be an opportunity for us to discuss or to continue, in essence, what is a pseudo work session. There was a couple items that was brought up at the last meeting. One was defining or expanding the term private entity to include privately owned and operated corporation, enterprise, or entity that provides monitoring or reporting services. We kind of discussed that a little bit. And then there was another item that we wanted to discuss, and that was further defining what qualifies as initial training and continuing education, with ethics and rules being a central part of what's included. So there's some opportunity for discussion there. And then at one point in time, the council administratively intimated that they would like uniform standardized reporting from companies to judges to be instituted and then also sent to the council. So those were the three things that I recorded from our last meeting. But Judge Starnes did recently attend the judicial conference I guess, early in September. Before we dive into any of those things, did you have any comments that you'd like to share with the council, sir?
Well, yeah, there wasn't anything. First of all, Senator Mike Bell was all over amending the definition of what private probation services is, and somehow or another it got lost in all the other things that we were doing for the judiciary as well as private probation services. He told me they were really hot and heavy going after it, but they got sidetracked with another issue. He told me they're bringing it up again this year. So I'm assuming this year they're going to get into it and actually address it. But they do need to change the definition of what's included. I'm going to leave that up to them. And Judge Logan will probably monitor that. Well, definitely monitor that through our conference lobbyists.
Okay.
We did change the CLE requirement, I believe the ethics requirement. They did not touch the definition yet.
Okay. Well, it looks like they'll be handling that in legislative session then. Unless there's any comments, then we can move to that the second piece, which was qualifying what or further defining and qualifying initial training and in continuing education. As to ethics and rules, our rules being a part of that education, defining that, I think, more readily and clearly. Are there any comments?
And this is Judge Logan. Right now, is there any standardized type of initial training, and do they have any requirements to teach ethics?
I'm pulling it up now. I don't believe so because I've got their rules up now, and I'm looking. Let me take a look. I think where we left it, there was not. No, there's not. There's some. No, it's very broad, very broad. I mean, there's one section in Section A that says probation law, but that's, and then at the first part of paragraph A, ethics and professionalism. So there is some of that, but it seemed like it was more in tune because there's a caveat there that says including gender sensitivity and sexual harassment training. So it's more HR. This seems to be related type of programming.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Now, one thing I will say is that we don't have to have it all figured out right now. One thing that of course, we always like to come together and have that consensus. But if there's something that you think of even after our meeting that you'd like to send to us as a model or an example, and then we could present that back to the council in February at our next meeting, we can do that as well. Just some practical sort of recommendations that we can sink our teeth in and move that forward administratively, so we can move out of the abstract. Any of those things are helpful. And Mr. Wright, I know that you would be instrumental in that as well. I imagine you've had probably some ethics training that you liked or didn't like, and you could
Certainly.
and assist with that. So any recommendations there, or if you look on if you look at the training and continuing education, the rules there, 1177-3-01, it itemizes what those are. Perhaps it's just it's a rule change where we just add a paragraph there, and any recommendations from the judges, that would be welcomed. And then we just put that in the form of a rule and then clarify what we mean by that on the record. That might be one path forward as well. All right. I don't hear any comments, so we won't belabor it. But as I would, any recommendations you have when you get to that section of the rule, with ethics and the rules particularly in mind, the Probation Services Council rules in mind, any sort of phrase or any sort of statement that you would like to add to the rules would probably be helpful. I think that's probably the best way to do that. So if you want to send that directly to me, that'd be appreciated. Then we can always bring that in the form of a proposed rules filing at our next meeting. And then of course flesh that out a little bit more about what it is that what we have in mind, and then some practical examples, Mr. Wright or somebody else, as to what that might look like, what would qualify and what wouldn't, so we can really sort of fully understand and wrap our minds around what's intended or what the council would like to go going forward in regards to that.
The intent to make some of these topics required for training, certain specific ones required, or is it just to further define some of the topics for the training?
Yes, and by that I mean these are very broad topics, and so maybe a statement in some of these topics further clarifying is that what we're looking for would be helpful, and then maybe some practical examples to really drive that point home for discussion. And as far as uniform standardized reporting, that's something that's been kind of ongoing. If there's any examples as well, then I'll send a follow-up to the board for these couple action items. And if you could just respond to that email with anything that you may have in mind, and then we'll of course present that at the next meeting as well. That's all we had as far as those three items. Unless there's any other things that the council would like to discuss, either here or in new business, I'll be silent and give you the opportunity to do that.
If I could add on, this is Roxanne again, on the change in the statute regarding the continuing education for our officers, the 20 hours that used to be required, which is now the 8. As companies have in the last couple of months had to renew, we've made sure to let them know that there's this change. But the good news is, or at least I think from our last work group session, most of you were inclined to think that the 20 hours was a good number, and it's been reduced to 8. So we are, of course, confirming that they know that it's 8, but they seem to, or most of the ones that we've spoken to, seem to still want to offer the 20 hours and still require the 20 hours. They did not think that was a high number of training each year for their officers. So, of course, if it changes to 8, that's the minimum that they would have to offer. But it sounded like most of the companies agreed that 20 hours was still a good number. They just couldn't fit the training that they believe their officers need within the 8 hours. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
This is
Director
Judge
Russo.
Alexander. I have a question.
Yes, Judge.
I know that as an attorney, you're required to have so many hours of continuing legal education as judges, as different professions. Most of the time, those professions provide that training.
Correct.
Are we as a council looking to, or are we interested in providing that training for, like, let's just say the private probation services providing that or contracting or looking at places? It seems to me like the information that we received is a lot of this training is done in-house. And Mr. Wright, you could address that for us.
Yes.
Do you go somewhere for the training? Do you have a conference, or do you get a book? Do you watch a video? How is training provided?
Sure. There's no professional organization that I'm aware of for private probation misdemeanor in Tennessee where you could get the training. All of ours were done in-house. We normally would a combination of things for an in-service. We may have guest speakers. We may have attorneys, district attorneys, even judges come in and speak. Individuals from treatment providers may come in and speak about addiction, and of course just internal workings of the company as well, just things that need to be covered. That's typically how we handle the in-service.
And Judge, if I could add, based on the renewals, we see what the companies offer within those 20 hours, and we're going to be very specific to make sure that they give us enough breakdown moving forward. But it does vary between one company and another. So what I want to bring up, and it isn't that we have to go down this path, but let you all have some time to think about it, is we can, as a council, offer something if the judges were inclined to look at something like that. We could treat it as outreach that even Glenn and I could carry out through the companies. And I say this because you looked at the budget as Director Kopchak touched on it. We have $700,000 there. Generally speaking, we should have 2.5 times our expenses in that budget line. And I say this because with the variety of programs we have, we're in front of our legislators often with sunset hearings for the program. So this program definitely has the funds there. We've already reduced the quarterly provider fee one time, and nothing says we couldn't if the judges saw that inclination. But I think your point, and at our work group sessions that we had discussing how important the education to the officers are to then really handle their casebooks better, this could be something that we look at and you all decide for consistency. At least it's offered. It maybe wouldn't be the mandatory one, but at least it would cover the topics that are important to you all as a council, and we have it available.
Thank you.
There would just be one caveat to that. Court reporters were looking at their budget was their reserves were looking pretty healthy a couple years ago, but there was some challenges on the horizon that we cautioned them. There was some movement in their industry, and as a result, they just kind of put a pin in that and waited a little while longer. And then now those reserves aren't quite where they were. They were basically trending where they were losing some applicants, so the revenue wasn't really coming in that they had expected to sustain that. That's not the problem here. However, I will say that Director Gamusio mentioned a board realignment, so there's a lot of administrative expenses no longer shared with those other boards, so private probation will be sharing a little bit more of those sort of administrative expenses. So I would, just keep that in mind. So I doubt that we're going to be adding $10,000-$12,000 each and every year to those reserves. I think those will start to sort of level off and even start to trend as I'll take a little bit of a downturn as we dip into those reserves a little bit. So I don't know that we're going to have that 700,000 number, going forward in the next year or two. I do see that being reduced, and it needs to the point there. I think we were intimating that obviously the funds are available, but I don't know that we've seen the full realization of those added expenses that I think we're going to start trending into the next fiscal year. And as far as providing education as well, a lot of the boards that do that have an education recovery fund, a whole separate fund for that. And that's not something that, Commerce and Insurance is necessarily endorsing, but there's just a few that have done that. And as a result, they have an extra account just for that. Private probation obviously does not, don't foresee that they will. So, this is our entire operating budget. Okay. It looks like I'll go ahead and I'll send everybody those two pieces, requesting more information or a practical example, so we continue having that conversation. One thing I think there is opportunity in the CE to be addressed, because if you look at those rules, it's very broad. I mean, the QE, the qualifying education, breaks it down in blocks and basically subject matters to be discussed in those blocks. CE does not. It just basically annual in-service training. It's one paragraph, so it's very broad. So maybe even a caveat as to what you want there. Some boards, not to say that you have to go this route, but they do ethics every year. They have standards of practice, maybe just like a 2-hour block. Land surveyors do that. Of course, our appraisers do that with a larger block and their standards of practice. So maybe that's something that the council would like to consider, and putting something in there as well. So I would direct your attention to the training and continuing education portion of the rules, and in that big 40-hour block, a place there that you would like to put ethics and rules, and then in the CE, you'll have to further clarify what you would like there. So, and then of course I'll detail that into that after action follow up, and then I'll see your responses there. Okay. All right. Any questions or further comments?
This is Judge Starnes. It says under the amended rule that was adopted by this past legislature that the council shall establish 40 hours of orientation for new private probation officers and the 8 hours of annual continuing education. So we can put in there ethics or whatever else we want to put in there.
Yep.
What we got to do is do what the statute tells us.
Yep. That's correct.
Well, I don't know. I like the idea of there being some way that everyone gets the same training, because when you have that many different entities, and like what Mr. Wright said, this is what they do, but another entity may not go into that much detail. So if there was some way, I mean, we do have $700,000. There's some way that we could do some type of education training. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Even if it was just
tells us we have to do that. We have to establish it. So it's up to us, and we can put what we want in there and adopt it as a board following this statute. I'm looking at the statute right now.
Good. I like that. I mean, I'm comfortable doing it. I think that was what we had in mind for the legislature to do.
Right. They put it in our ballpark. So it shouldn't be that hard to establish. We can look at other states as well, but it shouldn't be hard to establish what that 40 hours of orientation for new officers requires, and the 8 hours of annual training, continuing legal education. So,
we already have 40 hours, so as you're establishing that may require a rewrite of those rules. So just keep that in mind as you're doing that. We'll just I'll send you a copy just for your convenience. I mean, you're more capable than I. Everyone here is an attorney and a judge to boot. So you're very capable folks. I imagine you could get there, but I'll send you just a link for your convenience, or and then you can just carve those up however you like, and then we'll present that in the form of a rules.
okay, that'd be a starting point.
All right. Any other comments? Thank you, sir. All right. Unless there's any comments, we'll move to the to new business. Is there any new business? All right. In that regard, the only thing we have left is to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn, Judge Logan.
Judge Logan has given us a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second, Stansel Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. We have a second there. For roll call vote, Judge Logan,
Aye.
Judge Alexander,
Aye.
Mr. Ford,
Aye.
Judge Kane,
Aye.
Mr. Wright,
Aye.
and Judge Starnes.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, members. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right. Y'all have a good day.
Santa.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you all.